Hey everybody, welcome to the Back to Brilliance podcast. We're your hosts Henry and Joseph. Thanks for tuning in. We ask that wherever you listen that you would subscribe, leave a comment or a review. It helps great people like you find our podcast. And with that, today we're going to go ahead and jump into our topic of the day. Today we're talking about action over answers and the new rules of entrepreneurial clarity. In this discussion today, we're going to be talking about we cover how too many entrepreneurs are secretly waiting for a friend's feedback, or approval for the right time, but nothing sustainable is built on borrowed belief. You'll learn why internal conviction must lead. So with that, guys, we want to bring on our co-host Joseph, and we're going to go ahead and get into the episode. So Joseph, say what's up. Take it away.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So, as I typically start, right? I say so, and then today I wanted to talk about. So today I wanted to talk about, just being the person who you want to be before you feel like you are, and also just taking action before you feel ready, right? Because a lot of the times, and even me, at sometimes still, I don't take action because I'm like, oh, I'm not ready to do that, or I'm not ready to step into that power or that responsibility, right? So, if we want to start a new job or whatever, or start pursuing a new career path, sometimes we will be like, oh, well, let me prepare for 6 months and then I'll be ready, right? So that is kind of a fallacy.
One of the things that I always say to people is you can't get ready. You got to be ready, and that's what we talked about, in previous episodes, how we've spoken about, when opportunity presents itself, you have to be ready, so a lot of times, like Joseph's saying, we put too much emphasis on, all the things that we have to do and all these, sometimes we're even looking for the validation from people, friends, family members, other people, and, it doesn't really build that real confidence and that readiness, so we have to be prepared and get as best as we can, but getting started and getting out there is making that move, so when you're ready, things begin to present themselves, so it's always taking the action, versus looking for the right answer, so to speak.
Definitely. Yeah, and I just want to point out that being ready is a moving target, right? So you may be like, "Oh, I'll be ready whenever I do this," and then you'll shift the goalpost. "I'll be ready when I do that," and so it will constantly be a moving target. So entrepreneurs that do that or believe that, they'll never launch, and I could speak to that very personally because there's been so much different things. Even starting a podcast, there was a point where I wanted to start a podcast for years, but I was like, oh, I'll wait until I build an online presence. Oh, I'll wait until this. Oh, I'll wait until that, right? And now we're in 2025 and I just started my first podcast. And so, if you're going to wait until you're done shifting the goalpost, that goal will fade away quickly. And not only that, right, feeling like you need to be prepared is normally or typically a fear of judgment, or fear of failure, or exposure, and that's a big one for me. I was afraid to be in the public eye.
And that's the thing, with being ready, like at the shooting range, it's, ready, aim, fire, and I've changed that around. I've learned this in some book somewhere, but change it up a little bit, be ready, fire, then aim. If you're always trying to make sure everything is right, and do all these things, you're never going to launch. That's the reality. So you don't grow by thinking about the next steps. You grow by taking steps. You're going to stumble, you're going to fall, but you're going to adjust, you're going to calibrate, you're going to continue to move in motion, staying still, closed mouths don't get fed. right? So staying still, that's what that means. So like thinking, oh, I got to have this, so let's take a business, for instance. In some cases, some people feel I got to have that website in place first. I got to have my following, like Joseph said, before I do this. I got to have, my likes all built up, all these things you got to have, and the reality is it's not true, it's the lie of being of readiness, so the reality is as you start to get out there and start doing things, you're going to just polish this, up. You're going to learn through your experiences, it's going to build momentum and the clarity is going to come.
Definitely. And I kind of want to pivot to the next point, which is, behave as if it's real until it is. I don't really like the phrase fake it until you make it, because there's nothing to fake. It's just be who you want to be until you truly are, right? So instead of fake it until you make it, just be until you are, right? Or do until you are. So even though, I mean, everyone can agree to this, at least in some point, or, to some degree, because oftentimes, whenever we're trying to get into a new career field or whatever, I'll speak to my own experience. Whenever I was trying to do software engineering, everyone around me was like, "Oh, just get a job and then you'll learn. Get a job and then you'll know how to do things." Because, even though you may do tutorials and projects on YouTube, it won't be until you're actually on, in the spotlight is whenever you'll actually learn. Or, just growing up, everyone that around me was like, "Oh, I didn't learn anything until I joined the job or until I started doing the job," right? So behave as if you are until you are, right? So again, if you're trying to do something or be a new person or adopt a new habit, right, just behave as if you already have that habit until it is the habit that you have.
Agreed. And that's one of the things our next point we're talking about is like we're looking at, your behavior must reflect who you want to be, so behaving like the way you want to be already, and not just looking at how you currently feel things are. It's who you want to be and what you want to accomplish, so that's why we shared again before that, writing things down, putting it on paper, because until you put it on paper, it's just an idea. But once you put it down on paper, it's now tangible. It now has to do something. It's the seed. You planted the seed, and you can't, you can't pretend that things will be good. Like Joseph said, fake it till you make it, it's like people can spot a fake a mile away. You know what I'm saying? So the reality is that like your behavior has to reflect the way you want to be and the things that you want, and they're going to come. It's just a matter of time. And I think because of our society being a microwavable society, everything has to happen now, and if it doesn't happen, I'm going to give it a week. If it don't happen, then it must not be, and I'm going to continue doing something else. He who chases many rabbits catches none. So the idea is, write it down and behave like, the person you want to be.
Exactly. And I want to second what Henry just said. You don't need to fake the results, but just do the model or be the model of who you want to be, right? So in one of the books I read recently, it said to image or imagine 5 people or even 3 people that you look up to, really pinpoint what it is that you admire about them, and then start to model that, right? So there's a individual that I look up to to some degree, right? I'm not gonna idolize or pedestalize him, but I do admire his business acumen, right? I do admire how he conducts himself as a businessman, right? And so also how savvy he is with business. And so all of those things, all of those traits that I admire about him, I'm trying to integrate that into my personality, right? So the way that he talks about making a deal, it's not Donald Trump, by the way. That's not who I'm talking about. But the way he conducts himself in certain scenarios, I've tried to pick up on, or even, another YouTuber. He's like a travel vlog guy, and he's very outgoing, very welcoming, and I've tried to emulate that in my life whenever I engage with people, and it's worked. It's rubbed off, and because it's worked so well, now whenever I talk to people in public, I almost mock or mimic the things that he would say, or not like what he would say, but more so the energy that he carries.
Thank you for saying those kind words about me, Joseph. Appreciate
Oh,
it.
definitely. Yep.
I'm kidding. We're kidding, guys. We keep it light around here. No, but that's true. You want to find a good role model. Somebody that you can model after, and when they have the good traits and the good characteristics of a leader, that's who you want to follow. And that's the things, because like begets like. So it's just the idea is don't fake it till you make it. Be authentic. Be your authentic self, and that moves us to our next point is, it's your story, and you get to rewrite your story. If you're not happy with where you're at, you could rewrite your story. You could redefine your future, and it's real simple. It's just, again, it comes down to just behaving, and, you being ready, preparing yourself, and putting it down on paper, guys. I'm telling you, I mean, it just sounds so simple, so elementary to say that, but I'm guilty many times of saying it and then not doing it. And then, what's funny is that when I realize, like, damn, I'm still in the same place. I'm still repeating the same thing. And it's like, well, did you write it down? And I have to ask myself. And then I go back and I do it because I'm like, I feel hypocritical. I'm telling you, and I'm not doing it. So what I'm sharing here is real truth. Is you get to rewrite your story. So, no matter where you're at, whether you're just starting out, you're in the middle, or you have to start over, the choice and the opportunity that you have to rewrite your story and redefine your future is up to you.
Definitely. And even how Henry just said, right? You can rewrite your story. So oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this too, but we'll be working off of our past identity, right? Our last failure, a past version of ourselves, right? So, a past version of me never really completed things, right? And so that's what I've been trying to rewrite this year, is I'm someone who completes things. I'm someone who gets things done, right? And so I'm not holding myself back to whenever I didn't do that. Instead, I'm like, okay, I am someone who gets stuff done. And Henry could speak about this himself, but I've gotten a lot done for the podcast, and even in other things, because we share what we're working on with each other. But yeah, it's just stop holding yourself back and stop holding yourself to the past version of yourself. If you do, then you'll be constantly creating limiting beliefs about yourself. And also, reinventing yourself isn't about ego. It's just about upgrading your internal system so that it matches the level of what you're trying to do, right? So again, I'm trying to be someone who gets stuff done, is reliable and dependable in whatever field that I go into, right? That way I'm reliable enough to get stuff done, and people can depend on me to, again, finish what I start or say that I'm going to start. And so I'm not perfect about it still. Henry could probably attest to that too. But again, we're all a work in progress, and, we're all building ourselves, and we're all trying to improve. So you're not just building a business, you're becoming someone capable of success. And that's something that I've really had to embrace within the last 2 years. Is I was like, oh, well, now that I'm 25, people always say that's when your brain stops developing and this and that. But no, we're constantly trying to improve. We're constantly trying to, again, make ourselves better. And the more that you improve yourself in your business, it will also reflect in your personal life.
Right. And it's not reinventing the wheel, guys. That it's just changing, the way we do things, So with that, we want to kick it up a little bit now that we talked about giving you that, that opportunity there to get ready, be ready, behave, as it's already happening, and let that, your behavior reflect who you want to be. You got the opportunity to rewrite the story, but now it brings us into our next point to, switch gears. It's, action creates clarity and it builds confidence, so, and that clarity, it's earned through the action, that you take, a lot of times, you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you expect different results. You guys already know what that says, but the thing is that we do it because we're creatures of habit, and we just, whether it's a good habit or a bad habit, whether it serves us or it doesn't serve us, sometimes we just do it because I've just done it for so long, it just becomes a way of life. So the thing is, in the rewriting, is you can change things if you don't want it to be this way. Entrepreneurs often, they want to map everything out before starting, but clarity is something you earn just by doing, and I've been guilty of that too. It's not just thinking, because I sit here and think 700 different scenarios and then I get out there and I do it and not one of those ones came to fruition.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and that's the type of thing, that you learn, is that just taking action, guys. Even if, one of my buddies, he used to say, do something, anything, even if it's the wrong thing, just don't stand still, and that's a good little illustration, to don't overthink it, just start doing.
Exactly. And, your market or your niche or your clients, they'll tell you what works, right? So, you may offer them X, Y, and Z, but then they're like, okay, what about J? And you're like, J? I only gave you X, Y, and Z, but they're, that's what they want. They want J. And so, strategy is iterative, so you can go from an offer to feedback to refining it and then repeat that, right? So you can offer someone something, then get feedback on it, and then you can refine and then, repeat that process. And again, confidence can come from evidence of success or of something working. So even though Henry was saying just journal, that's like the best fundamental step to do. But also, you have to build it by keeping the promises to yourself as well. So, if you write down in your journal, hey, I'm going to reach out to 50 people today, or I'm going to reach out to X amount of people per week, right? If you don't do that, then you're going to start doubting yourself. But if you keep those promises, then you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it because I did it last week. I did it. I'm going to do it because I did it yesterday, right? So just keep up the meaningful action, because making a call, posting the offer, saying no to people that you feel like are not aligned with you, that's proof of you becoming who you say you are.
And that confidence comes, by taking action, right? So, and by taking that action, it also builds momentum, and momentum always trumps motivation, but you can only motivate yourself so much. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but once you start doing it, that momentum starts the ball rolling, and the motivation to, I can pivot here, I can do this, I can do that, So motivational is kind of like, emotional weather, right? It changes. But momentum, it's built through, repeated friction, building up that, that momentum gets the ball rolling, So like, for instance, you could sit and think 1,000 different scenarios. Like I said, I think hundreds of scenarios and none of them pan out, So it's like, oh, what if they say no, like, what if they say this? What if they say that? So like the first sale, it's like, or your first post, or whatever. It's like, you're always thinking it's got to be perfect, and the reality is, it doesn't. And that's kind of like the motivation emotionally, like, if it's not right, I'm not going to do it. What are they going to think? So it's like, done is, doing something is the new perfect, so it just like, it helps you because now you have a benchmark that if it didn't work, then you have something that you can test against and say, okay, well, that didn't work. Example, our podcast, some of our podcasts hit, some of them don't, and that's just common on all podcasters, all YouTube channels. It's like the one you think that you're putting in all this effort and, oh man, I've studied and I prepared and this is going to be the best thing. A lot of people, boom, and you're like, that's the one that hit. What the heck? So it comes down to just, building that momentum over motivation.
Exactly. And so, done perfect is flawed, because even though if you think that you've done it perfectly, there's always something to improve, right? So it's all about the reps. And again, I could speak to that personally because I've been mentioning that I've been engaging on X. And so I've engaged on X for a month now. And I started off with 20 engagements per day. And now I've doubled it to 40 engagements per day. But that's because I was building up the momentum over the motivation, right? So again, design the ecosystem that shapes you, which is our next point, because habits are one thing, but you have to build up the infrastructure for that habit to be created, right? So stuff like a daily routine, those are reinforcements for the future you, or that will, like, if you don't build up that infrastructure or that habit building process, if you want to call it that, you're only going to be pulling yourself back to the past. And again, with my own personal experience doing those daily posts on Twitter, I made a tracker for it. I had AI program a tracker for me. And so I've been using that every day, and that builds up a habit, because before I built that tracker and before I was keeping myself accountable, I only posted like twice back in December of last year. And then I was told by someone like, hey, post every day. And I only posted like 3 posts in a week, versus now I'm posting 5 times a day and engaging with 40 people per day, right? So again, I made the ecosystem and the infrastructure for me to build up the habit of posting every day.
Yeah, and that's the thing, habits, they form our routines basically, and your daily routines are either reinforcing the future that you want, or they're pulling you back to the past, right? So like, you can't drive your car looking in the rearview mirror. That's why the front windshield is so big, so you can see ahead. So what that means is, like, the habits that you have that have created routine for you, ask yourself if they're serving you, like, really take inventory. For myself, I just started taking exercise a little bit more seriously, and not crazy. Don't think I'm gonna be playing in the Olympics or anything just because I'm in LA. That's not gonna happen. But the reality is that there's times, because of my habits of not exercising, not working out like that, it's like, damn, I felt it. And now that I'm older, it's like, oh, I really feel it. So I'm creating it as a habit, to get out there to exercise. I read and I study every morning, that's a habit, and it's been, reinforcing me, and, it keeps me, it builds that infrastructure, so just know, like, you have to, create that ecosystem that you want, so that it shapes you into be the, the person that you want to see in the near short future.
Definitely. And the next point that I want to bring up is environment shapes your identity, right? Just like the saying goes, that you are the sum total of your peers, or of the people that you have around you. Your peer group, your market, and business model all reinforce a sense of what's normal, right? So if my daily engagements were 1 post a day and 5 engagements per day, that would reflect on how much effort I'm trying to put into things. Or, like how Henry said, how he reads every day and he's starting to work out more often. If he was like, oh, I don't really care about reading every day, and I don't really care if I exercise, that will reflect on his overall drive, versus someone that's like, yeah, I run 5 miles every day, I get up at 6 a.m. That speaks to who you are. And so, again, choosing a market, if we were to talk about entrepreneurs, choosing a market where you can lead, where your values stand out, really amplifies your identity. Because if you're in a space where you don't feel confident, right? Let's say you're a software guy or a tech guy, and then you go into the nail salon business, you're not going to feel confident. You're not going to be like, I can't really display who I am. But if you go into AI or whatever the case may be, then you can really, be a fish in water.
Yeah, and just for clarity, I'm between the guy that doesn't do anything and the guy that walks 5 miles a day. So but it's I'm building it up. But we say that jokingly, but in reality, guys, it's a habit, and it takes time to build those up. So, and yeah, the environment shapes your identity. Those that you're around. So if you want to soar with the eagles, you can't hang with turkeys, guys. So like you have to look at your circle and see, like, sometimes the people you're around, they have good intentions, but you're in order for you to get to the next level, you got to get around those people that are doing it, and then that brings us to our next point, is to stop asking for external validation. I think a lot of times that's what social media is, just looking for that external validation by the likes, the thumbs up, the comments, the attaboys, and it's kind of, we do that too. Most entrepreneurs, sometimes they secretly seek permission, maybe from mentors, friends, and again, like I said, followers, before they even make a move. So if you find yourself in that position, telling you can just stop it. Stop asking for that external validation, because you already know what you want. Nobody's going to tell you what you want. You have to know what you want and then start doing it. Otherwise, you're just going to be tossed to and fro, right? And you're doing what everybody else wants. And one day you'll be an older person and you'll look back and be like, man, I wasted so much time. Where right now you have the opportunity to create anything and everything that you want for your life.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, the most powerful entrepreneurs, they learn to sit with the doubt, and they still take action, even though they may not be getting the likes or the views that they want, or that they imagine that they're worth, but they'll still keep showing up. They'll still, show up every day, regardless of whatever metrics or whatever doubt that they may have. And so validation, it isn't wrong, but it is unreliable, and it's definitely subpar to just internal conviction, because that is where you really become a boss of yourself.
Right. And that's the thing, guys, so it all comes down to just, being ready, guys. This is the time. If you're not doing the things that you want to do, just understand that, like, you have the opportunity now to make the changes. It comes down to behaving as if it's already happening. Let your behavior reflect the way you want to be, not currently how you feel, because we don't go by our feelings, right? We go by the evidence, of the things that we see. So, and the things that we don't see, that's called faith. So have a little faith in yourself and believe that you can do this, and if you're doubting, at any point you could rewrite your story. Understand that, like, don't let your identity be tied up on your last job or the last failure or the past version of yourself. The great thing is that every day is a new day for creation. So you can create a different outcome, and just understand, like we said, we kicked it up, that action creates clarity and confidence, and that clarity is earned through the action and the steps that you take, so the strategy there is just to get going, stop thinking and start doing, and because even when you overthink things, they don't even come out the way you thought they were going to come out. And I'm sure that you have many experiences like that, and understand that momentum over motivation is what's going to be the driving factor. And then we talked about designing the ecosystem that shapes you, your habits, they form the infrastructure of your identity. Your environment shapes your identity. So those that you're around, the stuff that you feed yourself, if you're not being motivated, you're not inspired, listen to more of our podcasts. You're going to find something in there, get the tools and, there's plenty of information at your fingertips, guys. Everybody now on this planet is without excuse. That's what I'm going to tell you right now. You're without excuse because before it was hard to get a hold of this information. Today's day and age, we're in the information age. Anything you want is, a search away. And then stop asking for that external validation. You know what you want, go after it. Don't seek it from the mentors. If your mentors are only there for validation, they should be there to be inspiration. Your friends should be inspiring to you. The followers are always going to either love you today or they won't, right? So just know that you have to keep going and keep pushing. And with that, guys, I want to ask Joseph if he has any closing thoughts before we end the podcast.
Yeah, definitely. That was a great closer. But yeah, I just want to, again, point out the fact that if you can't make action by yourself, how can you be a boss of others, right? If you can't be your own boss, how can you be the boss of others? And so, again, stop trying to seek external validation and just take action, right? Stop trying to doubt yourself. Stop trying to do all of the things that keep you from being your own boss, and just be your own boss today and tomorrow. And I want to give a shout out to our community because that's why we made it, right? That way we can empower people to be their own boss. And it's for entrepreneurs that feel tired of doing everything alone. We have practical self-growth tools, real community support, as well as weekly structure to help you stay focused and follow through with whatever you're trying to work on. So that's at backtobrilliance.com. If you scroll down to our community tab, you'll be linked up with like-minded people like you.
Well said. All right, guys. Well, that does it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for listening to our podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, share it out, leave a comment and a review. It helps great people like you find our podcast. And with that, we're out. Until the next time, stay blessed.
Bye-bye.